Hi, welcome to Marlene at Home. And I'm Marlene from Carroll County Public Library, North Carroll Branch. And thanks for joining us. Today I'm at a friend's home and we are going to talk about canning summer's bounty with a friend.
Hi Marlene, come on in. You picked the hottest day of the summer.
All right, when I knew I wanted to do a program on canning, I knew I didn't want to do it because I haven't canned in years. I came from a family that canned everything, my mother, my grandmother, but over the years, little by little, I didn't keep it up like some of my friends did. My sister still does some canning, but not me. But anyway, I knew right away that I wanted to ask my friend Lynn. Lynn works at the North Carroll branch with me. We've worked together for many years. She's in the children's department. And I said, Lynn, and let me come to your house instead of my house. So you'll see something different because you've seen every corner of my house. And this is a wonderful house to come to.
That's kind of you to say, Marlene. Well, as you can kind of see in the background, I'm a farmer's daughter, and I'm in a frame white farmhouse. It's 110 years old, and I'm sure the first lady of this house canned many a food. And I too grew up with a grandmother two grandmothers that canned, and my mother produced all the food we ate as children. I like to say that I only thought that canned food came from fruit cocktail or pork and beans, and otherwise my mother canned everything she grew. She started planting her garden so that she knew what she could can over the summer so that we would have food all year round. And one time she was telling me she had gone someplace to an orchard and the lady had so many cracked cherries that she couldn't sell first quality produce, that she dumped a laundry basket and filled her trunk full of cherries so that we could, she says, we gobbled them up as children. So we definitely ate a lot of canned foods. And then,
that's neat.
Thanks. And then I got my first blue ball canning book. I think this is the handbook for a lot of canners. And I've canned many things. My youngest son loves to hunt deer. We've canned the deer meat, and our friend Chris Peters, who used to work at the library, taught me that. And another one of our customers taught me how to can chicken. So that's all done in a pressure cooker with steam building up and sterilizing the food that way. But the easiest way that I think a lot of farmers used was to use hot water bath canning, and that's the easiest way to make pickles. You've talked about how your mom loved bread and butter pickles and about how you would have that at holidays.
Oh, I love, we always had it, bread and butter pickles and 3 different peppers, like red peppers, green peppers, yellow peppers. And I have trouble eating roast beef without that pepper relish and the sweet pickles, the relish.
Well, and then there's pickled beets. You can obviously pickle beets.
I have those too.
And especially with eggs, pickled beets and eggs. And this is a corn relish. And then green bean pickles. That's kind of my specialty that I've made year after year after year.
And they're wonderful because that's different. If they're the ones like you've given me, that are the pickled string beans, I'd never had those before, and they are wonderful. You can just pull a stick out of the jar and eat it like a snack. It's great.
Thanks, Marlene. And then pickled peppers. How are you at that tongue twister?
I'll let you. You tried that on me once before.
Anyway, so I wanted to let everybody know a little bit about history of canning because, again, our dear friend Chris Peters just closed her farm, and she gave me some of her jars that she had in her pantry or in her basement, and this is the first jar, and it's a reproduction that was made in 1976 for our bicentennial. It's a reproduction of the original 1885 to 86 canning jar that was made with a zinc band and a porcelain lid. Okay, and then the next oldest jar I have is from the 1900s to 1910, so it's about the same year of this house. And you can tell that because there's 3 loops in the ball logo. And this one has a zinc lid with a porcelain top enclosed. And these rubbers were actually in my mother's drawer from when she was a young farm wife. You never throw anything away. And she said you would soften this rubber ring, and then you would put that on the jar and tighten down the zinc lid with the porcelain center. All right, so beginning in 1910 to 1923, again, the ball insignia on the jar, on the blue jar. Do you remember blue jars, Marlene?
I do remember.
And it's a little bit different, signifying that it's from 1910 to 1923. And these are all, both these last 2 jars have been half-gallon jars. (1923 to 1933). Again, the insignia just changed a little bit with that little rounded part of the B. And during that period of time, canning became really incredibly popular during World War II, when everybody was having their victory gardens, and more home canners began canning.
To learn some history that you may not have known. I sure didn't.
Well, we have lots of canning books at the library, so you can come in and choose a recipe. But today, I thought I would teach you how to make cowboy candy with jalapeno peppers. You ready to go out in the garden?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
So to make this hot pepper cowboy candy, we have to pick some hot peppers. This used to be our herb garden, and now it seems like the flowers have taken over, but we still do have some peppers amongst the flowers. So we're going to just go down this path and pick some hot peppers. So for this recipe, we're using jalapeno peppers. So I'm going to pick these right off of this bush. The recipe calls for about 3 pounds, so I'm hoping I have enough to make this cowboy candy. Let's chop our jalapeno peppers into rounds about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in length. So I'm going to cut the end off. I'm going to discard that, and then I'm just going to chop the peppers to make the rounds for the pickles.
Looking good. Smells good. But now tell me about the gloves.
More than just for COVID.
We're maskless too. But we're outside, so it's okay.
The hot peppers, they like burn my hands. Some people, it doesn't bother them. But the vinegar and the sugar are going to soften and change the flavor of the peppers slightly. But for me, can you smell them even?
Yes, I can.
They're just too hot for me to use without gloves. My hands have burnt for days afterwards, and I'm just not going to have that happen today. I'm going to use a little caution making our cowboy candy.
Good, good, good. So this cowboy candy, is it real hot and spicy?
Well, it has a lot of sugar to preserve it. Just like pickles, all pickles have a brine. So this has vinegar, and then with like dill pickles or most cucumber pickles, there's a lot of salt in them. But in this recipe, instead of using salt for a preservative, we're going to be using sugar. Now that we have the jalapenos all sliced, we're going to go ahead and make our brine. So as I mentioned earlier, a brine is made out of vinegar. So this recipe calls for apple cider vinegar. You'll see at the store plain white vinegar or white wine vinegar or red wine vinegar. Different pickle recipes call for different things. But for this recipe, we are going to go ahead and use the apple cider vinegar. So to make my brine, I've got 2 cups measured, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in my pot. And pickles are either seasoned with salt or sugar. And because this is candy, it lives up to its name, and it uses 6 cups of granulated sugar. I have that measured out into this measuring bowl. And then we need some seasonings. So the seasonings that this calls for is a half teaspoon of turmeric, a half teaspoon of celery seed, 3 teaspoons of granulated garlic, and a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. More heat for our pickles. And then I'm just going to put it on the burner, and I'm going to bring it to a boil. Now I have all the ingredients in the large pot. I'm going to bring it to a rolling boil, and then I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to simmer it for about 5 minutes. So now that the brine has boiled for 5 minutes, I'm going to set it off the stove, and I'm going to add the jalapeno peppers to that hot sugary brine. And then I'm going to put it back on the stove, and I'm going to let it simmer for 4 minutes. So that's the next step. So I'll get that back on the stove, bring it to a boil, and I'm going to let it simmer for exactly 4 minutes so that the peppers can cook too. Now that the peppers are boiled, I'm going to move them off the stove burner, and I'm going to use a slotted spoon, and I'm just going to take out the peppers, and I'm going to put them in my prepared canning jars. So you want to make sure your jars are well washed and that they're sterilized. So I'm going to go ahead and fill these half-pint jars with these pickles, with the peppers, excuse me. And you're going to need to fill the jar to about a 1/2 inch from the top. So, and a jar filler like this is very helpful in making sure you get all your peppers and your sweet sticky syrup is left in the pot. Because when we're finished filling the jars, we're going to boil the syrup a little bit longer, 6 minutes at a high boil, to reduce the syrup or the brine to put over our pickled peppers. There's that tongue twister again. We talked about the historic jars, but I never got to talk to you about how we can for modern days. So now you're going to use a 2-piece lid. So this is the lid that has the little bit of rubber around. You're going to need to bring that to a boil slightly just to soften that rubber. And then when you have your jars, you've wiped off the rim. After you've put all your brine on, you're going to wipe off the rim. You're going to put this heated boiled jar lid, and then you're going to screw them down. So that's the 2-piece lid. So that's what you can, if you're lucky enough, find it in the store these days. It's a little tricky to find with COVID. We've boiled it heavily. Slide it over here, and I'm going to fill those jars that have the peppers already in. And again, I want to bring the brine up to about a 1/2 inch from the top, because as it boils, you need to give it room to expand. And the jar filler is really helpful in making sure you get all your syrup into the jar. Boil those jar lids and get them into the canner. So when you're canning your things, you want to cover them with water and follow the manufacturer's directions to make sure you have sterile and food-safe food for your family to consume. But I hope you give it a try. Canning is a lot of fun, and it's a hot prospect.
Especially on a 90-degree day.
I agree.
Lynn has just taken the jars of pickled peppers out of the canner, and already the jars are starting to bling and to pop, so that's really fun. I think I've heard 2 so far, and I might have missed some. But anyway, we've just brought them out here on this hot summer afternoon, and many thanks to Lynn for doing this and letting me come in and invade her space and make this wonderful recipe. And you know, here's the bounty from her garden with all kind of things. We've also put out some of the books from the Carroll County Public Library that you might want to consider related to canning. And I just want to thank you again for joining me at Marlene at Home, and I hope you'll come back again.